Each of us, in our everyday lives, has a job to do. The job of a sailor is to sail a ship. Every day, in ports at home and in ports around the world, our Navy ships get underway. And for the man of the sea, no matter how many times he has done it before, there's always that tinge of excitement on lifting anchor or leaving a dock, on becoming a moving part of a busy port. So it has been since men first ventured upon the sea. Seaports are safe haven or points of departure, with ships of every rig and description. The water, the sounds and the motion, the docks, the piers, the gangways, and the lines, all within the confining harbor walls. But these clean gray hulls are fitted for deep blue water. They were made to take our country's flag wherever it is needed on this earth. And as for our Navy and its men, even though they may not stop to think about it, the work they do has a broader meaning than the sailing of ships that were designed to fight. For the truth of the matter is that our Navy pays us many extra dividends, large and small, all the time. We Americans spend more than $20 billion a year for our Navy. We think of this Navy as a fighting force defending our shores, protecting United States interests abroad, and projecting our policies abroad. And in wartime, denying the seas to an enemy. But we get much more than military and naval power for our money. The $20 billion spent to operate and maintain an effective naval force returns to us several times over in direct and indirect benefits, which affect our daily lives, even into our living rooms and kitchens. Yet we seldom think of this spin-off when we tally the cost of naval operations. A great fighting Navy costs a lot of money. So does butter. And there may be a closer relationship than you think between your Navy and the butter on your table. Merchant ships sail the seas to bring us much of what we need to live, and to carry around the world the products we make that help us buy those things we need. Most of the things we need, and the things we sell to others, move across the commercial sea lanes of our busy world. If we think about it at all, it probably is in terms of the romance of the sea, of bright pennants in a sunlit breeze, of ships cargo-laden and tall. Ships at journey's end from some faraway place, and the men who command at sea. It is so easy to forget that each ton lifted across the oceans is a brick in the foundation of our national economy. That each container holds an essential part of that prosperity at home we have almost come to take for granted. Our strong Navy assures freedom on the sea lanes. One of the things our $20 billion investment in the Navy does for us is to provide a capability to protect our multi-billion-dollar export-import trade, if that kind of protection ever becomes necessary. The import side of this trade is most significant. It boils down to this: without it, we would not have the life we know. our highly developed technological and consumer society could not survive. For when it comes to certain essential raw materials, whether we like it or not, we are a have-not nation. We have built in our country the greatest capability the world has ever seen for the manufacture and fabrication of useful products. But the appetite of our factories and industrial plants for raw materials is enormous, and the hunger for raw materials grows as technology and consumer demands keep creating new products and new processes. The time is long since past when that part of North America, which is the United States, contained the greater portion of all those natural resources required for our growing industry and our economic health. For a long time, the flow of materials and primary resources coming into our country has been the difference between a limping national industry and a great one. To sustain our world and the security and relative prosperity with which all Americans live, we do not have enough and must import iron ore, tin, mica, copper, manganese, tungsten, rubber, sugar, fibers, asbestos, bauxite, chromite. We also must bring in for American industry petroleum, cobalt, nickel, columbite, zinc, thorium, zircon, tantalite, uranium, antimony, beryl. In one way or another, these materials, elements, and ores are necessary to all of us. Most critical of these raw materials we import are elements used in making high-test metal alloys. We also import many of the basic materials used in plastics and exotic fuels. Our huge tire industry is partially dependent upon imported rubber. The delicate pieces in our electronic sub-assemblies contain many materials from other parts of the world. It is because we can bring these things into our country that we have much of the glittering hardware to make our modern world go. Almost all of these imports find their way into ordinary objects scattered around the places we live. Matches are brightened by antimony. Asbestos roofs buildings. It also covers floors. Pots and pans begin as bauxite, and so do children's toys. There's beryl in spark plugs. Cobalt hardens tools. Imported chromite in stainless steel. There's copper in our coins. Rockets, missiles, and our space hardware depend on niobium and tantalum to resist metal creeping and fatigue. And so it is for those raw materials we import. They are in daily use. Iron ore, fibers, lead, all of them. Yes, from asbestos to zircon, and all the things in between. Manganese, rubber, sugar, and tin. We're surrounded by products made of imported raw materials. As big and important as our import trade is, our export business is also important. We now ship from this country almost $35 billion worth of products and merchandise. And like our imports, most of it goes by sea. American-made products shipped around the world, in addition to other things, help strengthen our international ties and take bits of America to foreign lands. It is not a case of making other peoples dependent upon us. It is the circumstance of helping them to know what the American way of life can produce. In the international trade sense, American exports represent our national profit from this high-velocity industrial machine we have. One way to express it is to say that we take many of those imports of raw materials, turn them around, and export them as finished products. In the process, millions and millions of jobs are created, and we make a profit to boot. And there is a point here not to be missed. It is that the overwhelming bulk of this trade we have been talking about has to go by sea. These American-made products are shipped around the world and do more than strengthen international ties and broaden our foreign markets. Our exports are vital in maintaining a balance of trade that has a direct effect on the value of our money, the health of our economy, and our standard of living. All this, the bringing of raw material into American ports and the shipment of American goods to foreign markets, is too important to be left to chance or to the shifting political winds that blow from east to west across the seas. On what could we depend to keep the lanes of commerce open across the seas we have to sail, without a navy of our own? Our navy, one element of American sea power, ensures that our critical foreign trade can continue without interruption. To ensure this freedom of the seas, to keep our sea lanes open during the technological revolution since 1940, the Navy has had to do more than simply keep up with research and development in the many scientific fields. We've had to stay ahead. The search for better ships and weapons has always gone on. The evolution of threat and counter-threat is as old as warfare upon the sea. Since the use of steam, naval operations have become increasingly technical. Since 1900, increasingly sophisticated and complex. Most of the Navy's research facilities date roughly from the turn of the century. Working to stay ahead of any potential threat, the Navy contributed much to making the sophisticated world in which we live today. These laboratories followed closely on the early development of improved steam power and steel hulls. Our research facilities grew in the years when the use of oil, radio communication, planes, and submarines were all coming about. Here, high-test steel and metal alloys, airframes, power plants, and the instrumentation that first made high-speed flight possible were tested and improved. Special photographic techniques were devised. Medical knowledge was advanced. All were either born or their development pushed ahead in Navy research and development laboratories. The very complex nature of our dynamic society long ago involved American industries, large and small, in Navy research and development. The growing size of the U.S. fleet, the widening scope of its operations, and the increasing number of scientific and technical problems to be solved led to a growing need for industrial help. Ever since the 1940s, when it proved so effective in helping to develop the planes, the ships, and the weapons of World War II, the research and development facilities of American industry have helped bring about a more rapid rate of technical progress than the Navy could have achieved on its own. This process has also helped America grow. Over $1 billion a year are spent on Navy research and development programs in private industry. Navy contracts for the production of all the hardware developed in this way amount to $13 billion a year, plowed back into the civilian economy, creating new jobs, new opportunities, more growth. As all this equipment has increased in complexity, as submarines, ships, aircraft, and their weapons have grown more sophisticated, the skills and understanding of those who serve in the Navy have had to increase. Within any similar grouping that can be found, the Navy has one of the highest levels of education among its people. About 74% of all naval officers have at least a bachelor's degree. About 84% of all enlisted men and women have at least a high school education. Almost all continue to study and to learn professional or technical skills throughout their naval careers. Consider the impact of these figures on the American community. Nearly 1 million men and women serve with the Navy now. Over 100,000 of them go to one of the Navy's more than 200 schools each year. Several 100,000 more are always taking some of the Navy's hundreds of correspondence courses. Because the big Navy ships are in reality small cities unto themselves, the Navy teaches almost all imaginable civilian skills, as well as the military ones. We don't stop to think about it very much, but Navy-trained men and women do return to the civilian workforce of our country by the tens of thousands each year, bringing with them the workmanship they have learned, taking their places as productive Americans in their community. You won't have to look far for the Navy-trained doctor, the TV repairman, the skilled mechanic, the Navy-trained dentist. And think of the equipment they use. X-ray, the drill, the plastics, all this stainless steel, the lamp filament. All this comes to you, in part at least, because there is a United States Navy. And that's not all. The radar that helps bring in your returning plane, the radar operator, the pilot of your plane, its radio, altimeter, and other complex instruments. The type that prints your newspaper, the paper itself, lipstick painting the smile that says you're safely home, gaskets, pistons, bearings, tires in the cab that brings you home. Even the wires to your doorbell. Foam rubber in your chair. And the carpet on your floor. By now, you know the Navy does more than patrol the seas to help ensure the peace and military security with which Americans live. You see how many things in your daily life the Navy brings. How the Navy helps to shape the texture of your world, its richness and its depth. That big overall multi-billion-dollar return really is a dividend on the nation's investment in its fleet. For instance, next time you're called, remember, almost half the 31 raw materials in your telephone came from somewhere else in the world, by sea. Where does this extra dividend or civilian application of Navy research and naval operations end? A recent example of the Navy's engagement in American life can be found in Operation Sea Lab, one of a series of experiments in underwater living, which may have, in the long run, a most significant impact upon the future of all of us. Projects like Sea Lab and Tektite were designed to test how long men can be expected to live at the ocean depths, how much work they can be expected to perform, and how well they can do it. Why? Because men are beginning to see the oceans themselves as the last great frontier on Earth, one that contains a greater wealth of natural riches than was ever found on land. Coming generations are going to reap the harvest from ocean space. They are going to find the oceans as valuable as the land, and for the same reasons, the wealth of all kinds it will give up, and the life it will support. To extract what the sea has to offer, our children and their children are going to have to live and work in the sea. And they will. If you have a clock on your wall, you have the Navy on your wall, because the Navy gives us the precisely accurate time from which all our time is clocked. To set the time standard, the most accurate method now known is used, the atomic clock. And the Navy even refines that by using 16 atomic clocks from which a computer takes the average across them. There is a growing need in our complex age for precise time in very small amounts. A split second just isn't good enough anymore. We cut seconds into 1 million parts, or microseconds for near absolute precision in satellite launchings and for space flights. Our vast television networks and relays are controlled to the microsecond. The same precision is needed for air traffic control, for our telephone systems, and for scheduling the users of our high-speed computers. We could almost say, if you have time on your hands, thank the Navy. It may not be too long before a famous American saying falls by the wayside. It was in 1890 that the Hartford Courant editorialized, "Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it." But for some time, our Navy has been a weather expert simply because storms at sea can damage the best of ships, to say nothing of influencing the outcome of battles. In recent times, the Tyros weather satellite, developed by the Navy, has improved weather prediction. Naval pilots, the hurricane hunters, have found and watched little storms that grew into killers. And the Navy has tried to break up hurricanes and to change their course. But it all may be in preparation for the future, for there are those who believe that the oceans and their study will someday provide the keys to weather and climate control on the planet Earth. It is not easy to end the list of ways the Navy helps to make life richer and better for all Americans. Yet, at the same time, the Navy cannot forget its primary purpose, its first reason for being: to defend the sea approaches to the United States, to express the political and military intent of our country in places far from our homeland, and to be an integral part of our total national defense team. America today has the most powerful Navy the world has ever known, and it is a mighty force for peace. Its men, its planes, its ships and submarines are also ready to fight, if that is the will of our nation. Perhaps the reason our Navy is a great one is that even though it is far at sea, it touches the lives of all of us every day.